What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is the 2012 Infiniti G37x. Huge thanks to That Washer Nerd on YouTube for providing me here with his G37x to review for you guys today. So about the G37s here, well, the four-door versions here ran from 2008 to 2013, and I think it's a really overlooked sports sedan. I mean, back in the day, you know, it was compared with the 3 Series and the Lexus IS and vehicles like that, and to this day, still has really solid performance. 328 horsepower from a naturally aspirated V6 engine. That's something that still even the brand new Lexus IS can't match. And so these things, you know, in addition to also not holding their value as well as a Lexus, means that you have a really good performance bargain here with the G37s. And so as far as the styling on them, I always thought they were really nice looking vehicles. You could of course spice it up with the sport package, and there was the IPL versions and things like that for the coupe that made it a little more aggressive looking. But even here with just the G37X trim, it still looks really nice up front. I also just love how curvy the hood is here and how it rises up to meet the fenders here. And even the headlights, which were standard HIDs back in the day, have those little marks in them there around the projectors. Just all kinds of nice little details up front here on this vehicle. And you know, I think again it also blends in nicely too though, so it's not, you know, too shouty. It doesn't show off as much as an Audi or a Mercedes or something like that would. And so I think it looks really nice up front here. Coming down to the sides, you could also get some larger wheels on the sportier versions, but even here in the regular X version, you still have some nice alloy wheels, and you know, just a nice subtle line going straight to the back end there, where again you have some cool taillights with other little unique details of those little dots around the rings in the back of the taillights there. This one also does have a muffler delete, so you'll see some nice exhaust tips there to, you know, poke out and set it apart a little bit from a stock G37. But aside from those exhaust tips and some sway bars, this is a totally stock vehicle, and so it'll be a really great idea of what you can expect if you're looking to pick up one of these as well. And so overall, yeah, I think it's just a really nice looking vehicle here, even, you know, about 9 years later. The interior of the G37 sedan is also a pretty nice place to be. For 2012 standards, of course, it wasn't quite as nice as a BMW or an Audi or Mercedes of the time, but, you know, I think even these days, it has held up really nicely as far as, you know, not only wear and tear, but also just as far as the tech and how everything kind of works in here. So first off, sitting down in these seats, so you have these nice leather sport seats here in this version. Now, if you got an actual sport package of the G37X, which I believe also was available here on, you know, the regular all-wheel drive version, it did give you sportier seats. It didn't give you some of the other stuff you got on the rear-wheel drive sport models, but you could get seats with adjustable bolstering, which is really cool. This one just, you know, it has the normal adjustments, but so that would be an extra fun thing to have here. But even still, I mean, these seats still have a good amount of bolstering. Of course, the leather is a little slippery these days and stuff now that it's, you know, had 9 years of wear, but still just really nice and comfortable seats. The steering wheel here is really great. It has a nice 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches, a few buttons here on the wheel, and these really nice paddle shifters here on the back of the wheel, which seem to have come on a lot of G37 sedans, but not all of them. So the owner of this one actually installed these, but it was a pretty easy install, he says. And so great that you have these, and these paddles are basically what you get out of a Nissan GTR with the magnesium and leather you know, coating here on them, and are perfectly placed. I love that they're column mounted paddles as well, so you always know where they're at. Even if you're turning the wheel, they're always in the same spot, and so a really nice setup there. The gauges are also nice and simple but attractive looking. They're electroluminescent, so, you know, they're nice and dark there whenever you don't have the car on. Then whenever you turn it on, they come to life. And I also always like the kind of purplish backlighting you had here on Infinitis of this era, and you know, very simple, of course, being a car from 9 years ago with a little screen in the middle there. But all your basic gauges, everything you need there. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here. So this actually is one area where it, you know, feels fairly modern still, where you have a 7-inch screen right here at the top, and it's controlled with this little controller wheel. You know, it's just all your basic stuff with having the AM, FM. You could have satellite radio in these, and earlier ones had an auxiliary jack, but here on the newer ones you had a USB jack, which is really nice. So that also helps with, you know, keeping it a little bit more modern in here. And I'm sure it wouldn't be super hard to swap out that screen either, since it you know, isn't too integrated in there. You could probably pop that bezel out and put something newer in if you'd like, but still, you know, works great nonetheless. You have nice volume and tune knobs there, and this one is also paired up with this Bose stereo, which back in its day got a lot of high praise, and journalists seem to be really impressed with this Bose stereo in here. So great that you have that as well. Adds a little bit more of a luxury feel to this Infiniti for sure. And then you have auto climate control here, which is dual zone, and otherwise, you know, you have heated seats here, and just just the nice shifter that surrounds a few different center bins here. So as far as storage goes, you have in the middle here your usual cigarette lighter, ashtray kind of space there. And then behind the shifter, you'll see your 2 cup holders, which are nicely hidden away with this leather kind of padded material. And then you have a center armrest, which is your average typical size of this era, and has, you know, another power outlet in there as well as that USB jack. And so great to have all that. You'll also see little pockets in the doors with a bottle holder. Bottle holders were still not super common even in 2012, so it's really nice that we have that here. And so I think as far as storage space goes, it's really good. You also have memory seats here, so that's another nice little touch. Going off to the back seats here, though, in the G37, is a pretty good amount of space, again, for vehicles of this time, you know, in this segment. I think it's pretty good. So I'm 5'9", sitting behind myself. I have about 2 inches of rear legroom to spare. Obviously, some of the newer sports sedans these days, which have grown a lot in size, will be a little bit more spacious, but, you know, still totally fine for 4 adults as long as they're not too tall. Good amount of headroom as well still. And it's also nice for those backseat occupants. They have their own air vents. There's a fold down center armrest with 2 cup holders that pop out. Nice from that standpoint as well. And so, I mean, overall, it's a very nice, you know, little luxury sedan to live with. The trunk is also pretty practical. You'll see, you know, a good amount of space, nice wide opening there for golf bags, things like that, but also goes, you know, a good length back there. So yeah, I mean, you know, the materials and stuff aren't going to still be as premium as you got on, again, one of the German competitors of this time. But, you know, as long as you're okay with that, I think this is still a really nice interior. All right, so let's start up and go for a drive. The G37 here runs the familiar Infiniti key, which they still have been using right up until about a year or two ago. But you can see the nice metal kind of buttons here on the front. And I just love how small it is. With keys these days being enormous, this is really a nice little key. But of course, it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start here, even in a 2012. It's, you know, they were really kind of high tech with all that. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. And you'll notice that the whole gauge cluster and everything slides down along with the steering wheel here, which is a very cool little touch. So you have a really good driving position here in the G37. All right, so setting off here in the G37X. So the first thing that I think I'm noticing is that you have some pretty light steering. That's one thing that I've kind of noticed. It definitely has a good little bit of weight to it, but it's very eager feeling. It feels like it kind of really wants to dive in, and so we'll see how it feels on a back road. But other things here, you have great visibility in the G37s, and a nice view forward. View out of the back is great in typical, you know, sedan fashion. But I really like how the dashboard kind of drops down a little bit lower than some of the competitors, and so you really do have a good view forward. Other things here, you have a very responsive throttle. I mean, you just a little bit of pressure and it immediately starts to go. And of course, this one now does have 112,000 miles on it, so the brakes have a little bit of travel to them before they really start to bite. But in reviews that I read of these when they were brand new, they were actually super responsive, and right towards the top of the pedal there you get some good response. So that will obviously come down to, you know, the individual vehicle that you're checking out here, you know, these days, because they'll vary wildly, but still feels good in that regard. This one, I also have to say, I love the exhaust. Even just here at low RPMs, that V6 burble sounds really good. But as you can hear, whenever you get up to speed here, it is worth noting that if you do have a muffler delete, it does have a little bit of drone to it, so just be prepared for that. But you know, I think that's a small price to pay as long as you don't mind the drone to have, you know, the much nicer sounds of this exhaust. Although even from the factory, these did sound pretty good, even though it was a little bit muted. You still got a good bit of that V6 coming through the cabin. You're also running a 7-speed automatic transmission here in the G37s, and so it basically just gives you that extra overdrive gear, so it's not like the gears are super closely spaced together. It'll be, you know, similar in gearing to any other, you know, kind of 6-speed automatic. But it's been pretty responsive so far. You know, it doesn't take a lot of pedal travel before it starts giving me a downshift. And you also do have a sport mode here whenever you slap the gear shifter over, which will make it a little bit more responsive. And you also, again, have the paddle shifters here, which we'll try out in a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the sport mode here for the transmission. Let's turn down onto this back road and see how it does. And here we go. Very responsive. All right. Wow, it pulls nicely. Nice and strong acceleration from this 3.7 liter naturally aspirated V6 engine. It has 328 horsepower, 269 pound-feet of torque, and this thing revs to 7,500 RPMs, by the way. So this motor likes to rev, and it actually makes peak power right around 7,400 RPM. So if you actually want that full horsepower, you got to wring it out. So this is a motor that, you know, the torque figure isn't huge, and so, you know, it has a good amount of grunt, but, you know, you really find the sweet spot in those upper RPMs where it's really going to want to, you know, scream. And so it's, I mean, especially these days, you know, what other sports sedans even rev to 7,500 RPMs anymore? So, I mean, this is kind of a cool thing that's aged very well in that regard. But, you know, even in the sport mode here, though, you know, it was very responsive, but then, you know, it's right there ready to spring into action if I even just lean on the gas a little bit more. But it's, you know, also doesn't force you to be staying at 4,000 RPMs the entire time, like some of the other setups like you'll see with Lexus. When you have those in their Sport Plus mode, it's like they just want to sit at redline and they'll never chill out. So I kind of like how this is kind of a sweet spot with that. But anyway, we're going to try out the paddle shifters here, see how the manual shifting does. I love the column-mounted paddle shifters too. So it's pretty responsive, again, for especially a vehicle that's 9 years old, and a vehicle that, you know, 9 years ago this tech wasn't super advanced or anything. But it's pretty responsive, especially for a torque converter automatic. I mean, they can only be so quick. I mean, this is still going to be slower than, you know, what you see on newer stuff these days. But I mean, honestly, it's plenty quick enough to have fun with. Yeah, it feels great. But we're coming up some corners here, and let's see how the G37X handles them. Nice and flat. It just feels so small, especially by modern standards. This is so nice to have something that just, for a luxury sedan, to be so compact and agile. It feels really nice and flat. This one, in addition, it has, like I said, those sway bars, which certainly will help to calm down the body roll a little bit, and it feels really sharp. And other things about this that are going to help it feel pretty good in the corners is that it only weighs about 3,800 pounds, which is still pretty good these days. Most of these luxury sports sedans are around 4,000 pounds. You know, some even a little more than that. But all-wheel drive, luxury sedan, 3,800 pounds isn't bad in my book. This one also does have a tire upgrade. So this has Michelin Pilot Sport all-season tires here, and they're 225 wide, which is the standard width, but having that Pilot Sport, even though it is the all-season compound, is a really great tire, and so it gives you a lot of grip here. And also, the all-wheel drive system here in the G37X is a rear bias all-wheel drive system. So unless it detects slip, in which case it will send about 50% of the available torque to the front, but otherwise it's basically rear-wheel drive most of the time. So it's going to give you that rear-wheel drive base kind of feeling where, you know, it's going to play around with you a little bit and, you know, feel pretty sporty. And as we're slowing down, the brakes also feel nice and responsive. And I kind of like that they have a little bit of dead travel to them, because it means they're very easy to modulate without being rough or unsmooth. And so that all feels good. But yeah, this thing just is a really nice cruiser, and it's just a vehicle that just feels really good on back roads while still having a nice and comfortable ride, by the way. I mean, this road isn't the smoothest here, and it's still, you know, hasn't been beating me up over potholes or anything like that. There's really not much road noise either, so they did a really good job of, you know, keeping it pretty luxurious and quiet here while still, again, giving you the nice, just sharp handling. And yeah, it's just pretty impressed with just how polished it is, because honestly, that's something I read in some of the reviews back when these were new, was that, you know, the polish wasn't quite as good as the Germans, and that might be the case, but it certainly isn't bad. It still does feel luxurious. It feels a good bit quieter than, you know, the average sedan does even these days. And also, while we're just kind of stuck behind traffic here, you know, now that the revs have calmed down a little bit here, and that it really doesn't really have too much of that drone. It's really only whenever you're just accelerating, you know, between like 2,000 and 3,000 where you kind of get some of that, and then otherwise, you know, it's nice and quiet, doesn't really bother you. And the owner even says out on the highway, you know, you don't have any kind of droning really, so that's where it's really important, because drone on the highway really sucks. And so the fact this doesn't have that is, you know, means it's a really nice setup and kind of a best of both worlds scenario. But let's do an acceleration with the windows cracked here to hear how this exhaust sounds. Really good. Now we have the hills here to kind of reverberate off of. Yeah, I think it's a really nice sound, and I think this axleback definitely is a happy medium as well. I mean, you can do more aggressive exhaust and things, but I think it sounds really nice. And one other little thing I want to mention here while we're driving a little more spiritedly is that if you wanted to do a manual transmission, you can get those here. They offered a manual, I believe, in all trims of the G37 all throughout its lifespan. So even with all-wheel drive, you can get manual transmission, which is great. And so, if you're someone who wants that combination, which is again very rare these days, it's awesome that you were able to get that manual. And the manual, by the way, will be very similar to probably what you'll see in like a 370Z as far as feel and stuff like that. I've never driven a manual, so I can't say, but just another option. It's really great. And so, they might be a little bit more expensive and a little bit harder to find, of course, with the manual, but it is just a really great option to have, and that is something that, of course, you can get with some of the other rivals as well, but these days you can't. And so that's another thing reviewing this here in 2021 that makes this car extra special. If you can find one with the manual, that's going to be a very cool combo. Oh, there we go. Got a little bit of back end kicking out there. Especially the manual mode is where you're really going to get this vehicle wanting to misbehave a little bit more, because the automatic, it still does like to kind of upshift a little bit early sometimes. So keeping that manual mode, give it a little bit of gas coming out of a corner, and it really will do that little bit of rotation on you there. And it's very lively handling. So yeah, so much fun, this G37. Alright, so I've been driving the G37X for a little while longer here, and I still love how this thing pulls a red line, and it's just so cool to have a red line that high. It's something that, as I review mostly newer cars these days, it's really a treat to see something that goes over 6,500 RPMs. But anyway, other things though that I really love is how you get a little bit of wheel spin action whenever you're accelerating, especially with the wheels turned from a stop. And it's kind of funny because it's an all-wheel drive system that should be reacting pretty immediately to wheel spin, but it still allows you to get a little bit of spin every once in a while. It's for only a couple of milliseconds before it does kick in there, but you'll see the dashboard light up with the traction control light and all of that to let you know that it is actually spinning a little bit, even if you don't hear it. But especially with these tires, it does a really good job of putting the power to the ground. And even on these fantastic back roads that we're on here, it still does a really good job with the handling. I will say that it would be nice to have slightly quicker steering, and that is something that you do get with like the sport package you got on the rear-wheel drive G37s. I believe all-wheel drive ones didn't get all the same mechanical upgrades for its sport package, but if you were open to a rear-wheel drive one of these, you could get the faster steering in that sport package, as well as a sport-tuned suspension. I believe they got slightly larger brakes and a few other little details as well to help make them feel a little bit sportier. Like I said, you got the adjustable bolstering on the seats on those sport models as well. But so I think I could definitely see myself appreciating the quicker steering possibly, but that's really my only critique about the handling here in this. Otherwise, it's just really solid, very competent, very capable handling, and feels really great out here. And so yeah, I think the main thing about the Infinitis, and this is something that ever since they were new has been a really solid thing, is the value proposition of these. And that's really the last thing to talk about, is how these are a really good deal, even here in this insane time we're living in here in 2021 with this crazy used car market that we're in. If you're not scared of high mileage models, you can actually get one of these things. Even I just checked Auto Trader today, you can get some for around $6,000-$7,000, probably in rough condition, but you can get them. And then there's some, if you want a super low mileage one that's in pristine shape, some of those could potentially go for slightly over $20,000. So there's a big range there. But just, the fact that, again, if you're open to higher mileage, this one 112,000 miles, no issues, running really strong. If you're open to something like this, you can have a really fun, really luxurious, nice driving sports sedan here for probably $10,000, maybe $15,000 at tops. But that's a really good value these days. And again, you have all-wheel drive and you have a naturally aspirated motor, which those two things even combined these days is really rare. And to have 328 horsepower, again, this thing will still outrun probably a modern Lexus IS350, with this car having a 5.4 seconds 0 to 60 time. That still is very impressive even these days. And so yeah, I think it's a really solid vehicle that has aged really well as far as what it offers. And even if it was more expensive, I think just something like this is still a rare experience because of the higher red line, the engine, and just having all that in these compact dimensions, I think, is just, it's a really enjoyable thing to drive. And, you know, I will say that, you know, I think the G37 felt a little more tail happy in its coupe version. So obviously the all-wheel drive version here is going to calm it down. But I think maybe it was also the tires on the one that I reviewed a few years back. But that thing just felt a lot more tail happy and a little more playful. I'd be very curious to review one of these with rear-wheel drive and see how that feels. But if you're someone who, you know, wants the all-wheel drive traction, this is a really great happy medium. And I love that it is also, again, a rear bias all-wheel drive system, not like, you know, the competitors with Audi and stuff like that, where you'd have a front-wheel drive kind of base system. Having the rear bias system is great in this. And one other thing I will say, and this could either be an age thing or just because of, you know, a vehicle being you know, from 9 years ago, is that the transmission still every once in a while isn't quite as responsive as I would like it to be. There was a couple of times where, you know, I put the pedal down and I was waiting a little bit longer than I would like, but, you know, I can't really fault it for that. If you do want to have that immediate gear that you're looking for, you know, you can't just pop it into this manual mode and immediately have that downshift. And so overall, yeah, it sounds so good. It really, I love how it pulls so smoothly too. It is a buttery smooth engine, and that is something, again, with everything else being so turbocharged these days, to have that smooth power that revs as high as this does, it really is fantastic. And yes, the reliability might not be quite as stellar as a Lexus, but I still think you're going to come out way ahead with this versus the German competitors, which a 9-year-old BMW, Audi, or Mercedes, I wish you the best of luck if you buy one of those. You never know. I mean, some people have good luck with them, but generally you're going to have at least a lot of electrical gremlins and just a lot of expensive things you need to replace down the road and stuff, because all those German parts aren't cheap. And so yeah, I just think that this is a very underappreciated vehicle. When they were new, a lot of people slept on them, and now, you know, as they're used, I think they're going to start getting a little more and more sought after. So yeah, I think that's about all of my thoughts here on the G37X. And so anyway, huge thanks once again to That Washer Nerd for allowing me to review his Infiniti here, and let me know your thoughts on the G37X in the comments below. Be sure to check out the coupe review if you'd you know, like to see what that's like. And also, you know, this is very similar as far as the platform and stuff to the 370Z, so check out my 370Z reviews if you want to see, you know, what this feels like with this engine being turned up a little bit more and being a little bit crazier. Those are a ton of fun as well. But yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.